Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're exploring a massive, literal game changer in the history of management. For decades, the workplace was this rigid, unfeeling environment. Workers were essentially viewed as interchangeable parts in a giant machine. But how did we shift from that cold, mechanical view to actually understanding workers as complex, emotional human beings? How did management styles evolve from strict efficiency to focusing on human psychology and social dynamics? Well, that is exactly the fascinating journey we're going to unpack today. Let's get into it.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our intellectual roadmap for today. We'll start with 1, from machines to humans, 2, the Hawthorne experiments, 3, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, 4, theory X versus theory Y, and 5, the behavioral science era. Kicking things off with section 1, from machines to humans, the paradigm shift. To really appreciate this shift, we kind of have to look at the classical status quo of the early 1900s. Theorists like Frederick Taylor and Max Weber totally ruled the day back then. To them, workers were literally just cogs to be scientifically optimized. They believed there was only one best way to perform a task, and workers were expected to just repeat it under highly impersonal rules. But as you can see right here on the timeline, that whole worker as a machine concept started facing a serious challenge, eventually giving way to the behavioral viewpoint. Now, I want you to reflect for a second. Have you ever worked a job where you felt you were being treated strictly like a machine? A job where a manager simply demanded you hit a daily quota, say producing exactly 5 fans or writing 50 lines of code by 5 p.m., completely regardless of whether you were sick, stressed, or just plain exhausted. Yeah, that is the classical view in action. The behavioral view, on the other hand, completely flips the script. It introduces this radical idea that, to maximize efficiency, a manager absolutely must factor in the human element. Moving right along to section 2, the Hawthorne experiments, which is really the inciting incident for all of this. So, back in the 1920s, a guy named Elton Mayo, who is often called the father of human relations, set up this brilliant mini-mystery at a Hawthorne electric plant. He asked a super specific question. How do changing environmental factors, like turning the lights up, tweaking the heat, or even altering the room's color, actually affect a worker's productivity? Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the surprising answer he found. The classical theorists assumed that perfectly optimizing the room would unlock maximum output. But Mayo found something totally stunning. He actually dimmed the lighting, and to his absolute shock, productivity stayed high. It turns out the physical environment didn't fundamentally matter. Productivity was actually a function of the worker's attitude. Crazy, right? This exact discovery led to what we now call the Hawthorne effect. Simply put, it means individuals alter their behavior and improve their performance simply because they are receiving added attention. Those workers in the electric plant maintained their speed even in dim light just out of a conscious awareness, or maybe even fear that they were being watched and studied. They felt singled out, they felt important, and they adjusted their attitude and effort completely based on that feeling. Mayo's experiments yielded insights that completely shattered classical management. He proved that social and psychological needs are just as important as money. I mean, imagine being locked in an isolated room for 8 hours a day. Even if you were paid double your salary, the total lack of social interaction would absolutely destroy your motivation. Mayo proved that the human factor simply cannot be ignored in any management planning. It's a fundamental piece of the puzzle. Which brings us to section 3, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Building directly on Mayo's insights, the renowned psychologist Abraham Maslow stepped in during the 1950s. He wanted to figure out what exactly drives and motivates human beings. Let's move to key and see how this builds across 5 core steps. He basically argued that you cannot truly motivate a worker at a higher level if their lower-level needs are completely unmet. Let's ground this in the reality of the everyday workplace. First up, you have physiological needs, meaning the worker literally needs a salary to buy food. Second is safety. An electrical technician needs properly insulated gloves, or an office worker needs a roof that isn't going to cave in on them. Third is social. People need friendly bosses and coworkers to thrive. Fourth is self-esteem. Now imagine a boss who harshly scolds you in front of the entire office. Your self-esteem is instantly destroyed, and guess what? Your productivity plummets. Finally, if all those foundational needs are met, a worker can reach self-actualization, hitting their absolute full potential. Moving on to section 4, theory X versus theory Y. The manager's mirror. Douglas McGregor took these psychological insights and applied them directly to managers.
I want you to hold up a metaphorical mirror to your own boss right now. McGregor proposed two distinct manager profiles based on their assumptions of human nature, and this brilliantly illustrates the difference. On one side, you have the Theory X manager, who acts like a strict policeman with a stick, and on the other, the Theory Y manager, who uses trust and metaphorical carrots. Let's really drill down into Theory X. A Theory X manager operates on the rather dark assumption that workers inherently despise work, are naturally lazy, and will dodge responsibility at every single turn. Because of this belief, the manager feels they must constantly monitor their employees. We're talking strict memos, tight oversight, and the constant threat of job insecurity just to force productivity out of their team. The whole environment is entirely driven by control and fear.
So the crucial point is contrasting that with Theory Y. A Theory Y manager operates on the optimistic, bright assumption that humans actually want to learn and seek out challenges. They believe that a worker's presence in the office means they are ready to contribute. Therefore, the manager's job isn't to police them, but to empower them. When given security and appreciation, Theory Y workers make excellent, completely self-directed decisions. Finally, we arrive at Section 5, the behavioral science era. All of these early behavioral theories eventually transitioned into something incredibly rigorous, a true data-driven discipline. A major pioneer of this shift was Hugo Munsterberg, who is basically as important to industrial psychology as Frederick Taylor was to classical management. Munsterberg championed the idea that psychological studies shouldn't just stay locked up in academia. They absolutely must be turned into practical, everyday applications for real-world management. Modern behavioral science takes all these concepts and applies rigorous scientific research to them. It's all about quantitatively measuring complex human dynamics. You don't just guess if your team is loyal anymore. You actually collect concrete data to systematically measure the factors affecting trust, motivation, and commitment. It draws heavily on sociology, economics, and psychology to treat organization members as active, vibrant human resources. It completely and utterly abandons the old idea of workers as passive tools. Well, we've covered an incredible journey today, from viewing humans as mere machines to understanding the deep psychological needs that drive our success at work. But I want to leave you with a provocative question to reflect on as you go about your career. Look at your own environment. Look at how you lead, or maybe how you are led. Are you operating under Theory X or Theory Y? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this deep dive into behavioral management helps you empower yourself and everyone around you.